Welcome back to The Active Listener. My name's Mark and we are here to have interesting conversations and listen to people. And today I'm really pleased to say that I have Dr. Samantha Read on. She's Principal Lecturer in Marketing. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Mark.
Good to have you here today, and I'm really interested to see what hear what you're going to say regarding your subject. So could you unpack a bit about yourself and what we're going to be discussing today?
So my name's Samantha Read and I am Principal Lecturer in Marketing at Nottingham Business School, which is part of Nottingham Trent University, and also the Learning and Teaching Manager within the business school. I'm an active researcher, mainly focusing on the digital self. And what I'm really interested in and kind of here to talk about today is the power of the introvert and being introverted in an extroverted world.
Very interesting indeed. And would you describe yourself as an introvert or an extrovert?
Definitely an introvert. I think there's a whole spectrum, but I've known forever that I'm on the introvert side of that spectrum.
And how do you find that in a I think often extroverted world? Explain a little bit about your experience and indeed what it means to be an introvert.
For an introvert, obviously there's a wide kind of spectrum there, but mainly introverts prefer being with other kind of smaller groups or being alone and get energy from being alone and really value that time they can spend being alone. And for me, it's having that time to be creative and reflective is something that really does give me that kind of joy. And I've sort of kind of always been like that, somebody who's like reading and writing and doing that in a solitary way, and I still do that now in my career. But I think the world is not really set up for that, and straight from school you're put in a classroom with 30 children. It's a very noisy environment, very little time where you can actually have that time to be energized and spend on your own and be creative in that. And that kind of continues throughout school and university. And I think it's something that you have to manage as an introvert, and you kind of learn strategies to, because obviously you want to socialize with people and you still enjoy doing that, and you learn ways to kind of cope with that so that you can later reflect on that experience and get better at it, especially when you're with extroverted people, because that can also be a challenge I've found when you're in a situation where there are people who are much louder than you, much more vocal than you, and sometimes it can kind of not that you're competing, but it's harder to get your points across if you've got people who are more confident at doing that and feel more comfortable doing that in larger groups. So it's kind of a continuous reflection point, I think, for me, especially as an introvert, but I imagine for other people as well, because you have to kind of cope with it in everyday life. You don't just want to live solitary all the time.
I think that's an interesting point, though, isn't it, in terms of like the world of work, and indeed socially, that there is almost a pressure to put on a front. And I think if you naturally like those smaller groups or tend to be a little bit quieter, in some fields, particularly where they who shout loudest are going to be heard, it could be really quite stressful having to compete with that, or trying to be something perhaps that you don't naturally feel to be. So you're involved in marketing. You've recently completed your PhD and you've been researching into, what was the field?
It's marketing to the digital self. So it looks at brand relationships in a digital space.
Excellent. And that's something we're going to be talking about in our next podcast. But what are your thoughts in regards to leadership then, and being an introvert?
So I've recently, within the past 6 months, started a new leadership role within the business school as a learning and teaching manager. And this is something that I'm very passionate about. I'm very passionate about learning and teaching, and within higher education, but all levels of education as well, really. So it's something that I've always wanted to have more of an influence over. So being in this role, I'm able to do that. But again, I found this is a balance between helping people and supporting people in terms of staff development in kind of smaller group settings, but then also with hundreds of people. So from a leadership perspective, I think it's important to stay true to yourself, and I've always advocated for that even if you are introverted and you are put in situations now where you've got hundreds of people who are looking to you for support and coming to you, that you again use the kind of different techniques to be able to manage that. So I found that especially with extroverted people that I'm working with, to get to know them on a one-to-one basis first helps me in that bigger situation, because then I know what they're like, what they're interested in. I can kind of hone in on that rather than seeing them as this big personality in a wider context. So I think it's important that you still maintain that sense that you've got these kind of close relationships with people, because I think as an introvert that's something that really good at, really kind of listening to other people. And I've always had various mentoring roles throughout my career, so it's just taking that on a bigger scale, and so you kind of see lots of different mentors roles within one big space. That's how I kind of view it.
So in terms of challenges and benefits, what would you say is the biggest challenge as being someone who's introverted, and what would be the flip side of that in terms of what you bring as an introvert?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that initial period of getting to know people. For me, once I've got to know somebody and know what's important to them, know what they value, and kind of form that relationship, that's the biggest challenge, is actually just trying to get to that point where you feel comfortable with other people, especially when you're in large meetings or if they're online. That sometimes that could be, I found as an introvert, quite challenging, because you haven't got the signals that you would in a physical meeting where people can see that you want to say something, but maybe you just not quite got the confidence to do that. So that could be a challenge, but again, it's kind of learning how you can kind of overcome that. And you can have some very good chairs in meetings who will go around every single person at the end of the meeting. I find that's a really inclusive way of making sure that everybody who wants to say something is given the opportunity. And that kind of leads on to the benefits, really, that as an introvert, introverts kind of often very deep thinkers, and I tend to think a lot in meetings, to write a lot of notes, but then take it away. So I might not say something in the meeting, but I'll come up with ideas later, or email somebody later, or bring it to the next meeting. So appreciating that not everybody will have something to share at that moment. So factoring in how you can kind of collect some of those ideas later, or maybe in a written form, to make sure that everybody's kind of being heard if they're not so comfortable being kind of vocal in the meeting itself.
There's something there as a leader or as a manager that we have to be aware of, that people are different and that each person is bringing something to the table in how we interact and what they can offer to the organisation or business, whatever it may be. Do you think it's actually possible for us all to be our authentic selves? I mean, that's the buzz phrase that people are using these days, particularly from an introvert and extrovert point of view. Do you think the system is set up in such a way that we can do that within business?
I think it does depend on leadership. It depends on the opportunity that people are given to be their authentic self, and if there's any barriers in the way that's stopping that. And obviously outside of business as well, you've got this whole home life, and it's whether people even want to bring that to work, or there's a whole argument around whether people should bring that to work. You know, is that part of your authentic self? Again, there's lots of challenges there about what you do and do not share with your colleagues. I think it does come down to that supportive leadership, and I think within my organisation, that's something that I found I've quickly be able to adjust within a leadership role, because it is so supportive, and I do feel like people are given the opportunity to contribute, and people do really value my ideas. So you can be your authentic self, I think, if you're supported in that way, and with your line manager as well. I guess it's forming that relationship, I think, as an introvert is really important, so that you're able to kind of have that person who is your continuous support. so that makes a difference as well. So it kind of comes down to that as well, how you support staff.
Excellent, I agree. And so just sort of talking for a moment about your subject specialism, so marketing, how is that impacted from an introvert extrovert point of view? Is there something that you address within the marketing space around that?
So part of marketing, which can be a challenge, particularly for introverts, but could also be for extroverts as well, is in terms of giving a marketing pitch or giving a particular speech to potential clients in the way that you're going to have to deliver a presentation. And this is something I found when teaching marketing has been seen, especially over the last recent years, quite a challenge for a number of students to be able to develop those presentation skills, but also the confidence to do that. And we could give opportunities for students to have sort of formative assessments where they ungraded, but they can give a presentation in a way that we can give them feedback. But sometimes that barrier, which it could be something to do with introversion, of not being able to feel like they can physically stand up and do that presentation, could form a barrier to their future career. So it's something they really concentrate on to develop that skill, because we want graduates to be able to do that more confidently, and particularly in marketing, that's really important. And as much as all the ideas are important, it's very, very creative and what we come up with in a marketing perspective. If you're unable to deliver that confidently, that can be a potential barrier to kind of progression in that. So it's definitely something to concentrate on in terms of the presentation skills, particularly to large groups of people and people you don't know.
So it sounds like that there are kind of non-negotiables in one sense, that whilst there's a point there of encouraging people to be their authentic self and recognise that perhaps naturally they may be more introverted and getting that being energised on the one-to-one, then in certain fields there is going to be an element of having to speak up. And it seems that there is this kind of balancing act of being out there outwardly whilst also managing perhaps how you feel internally about that, if it's not your natural thing, as it were. That would be the right way.
Yeah, and I think there's different roles within different fields where you can have less kind of presentation or less kind of opportunities where you have to, or situations where you have to speak with lots of people. So within digital marketing, for example, it might be you've got a particular design skill, particular IT skills that can be made of you. So I think it's finding again people's strengths and what people really enjoy doing and honing that. But as I said before, sometimes people have really good ideas, and it's how we capture those ideas and whether we can maybe do that in a different way that isn't having to tell hundreds of people those ideas, in a way that you can kind of show it and capture that energy and that interest that people have for their specialism in a way that maybe they feel more comfortable in doing.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense, because I think a lot of people do have a passion, but maybe they have a perception as to how you deliver that, and so you end up being shoehorned into this box where you're doing something you kind of like, but it's quashed because you're trying to be someone that you're not at the same time. Samantha, thank you for your time. That was really interesting to hear about being introvert and that quiet leadership and mentoring. I understand you're going to be coming back and talking a little bit more about the digital self.
Yeah, it'd be great. I could come back and talk about some of my research that I've done into the digital self and how people have to form different versions of themselves, and digital space gives them the tools to do that. And we can have a good discussion about that, I think.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you once again. And to all of you that are listening or watching, please remember to like, share and subscribe. And we'll catch you next time on The Active Listener. Thank you very much.